Hi, I'm Hillary Walsh. I'm an immigration lawyer based out of Phoenix, Arizona, helping families across the globe resolve their immigration questions, problems, and issues. Today, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about bond, fianza in Espanol. Bond is important because sometimes a family member is taken into custody by ICE for various reasons. Perhaps your family member has been convicted of a crime and served jail time, and then now you understand ICE has what's called an immigration hold on them, which means they're now going to be taken into ICE custody. By contrast, perhaps ICE has somehow come into contact with your loved one or family member and has taken them to an immigration detention center. And so today I'd like to talk to you about how we can get them out, and that's through the process called bond. First things first, we need to know where your family member is located. This can kind of be a terrifying process because if you don't know where they are, starting with step one, it becomes very challenging. I'll post in the comments a link to where you can find the ICE online detainee locator. You'll need your family member or loved one's A number and their country of birth. If you don't have those things, and sometimes we don't have those either as your immigration team, what we'll need is their date of birth and their name and their country of birth. Sometimes even that gets complicated because if ICE has somehow misspelled or hyphenated your family member's name in a way that's different than what you anticipate or what they have ordinarily used, your loved one may not come up there. In any event, we can find them, even though sometimes it's kind of challenging, and then we start the process of getting them out of wherever they are. We'll then need to request a bond. You, of course, will need to be eligible for a bond, and the important thing here is to recognize that starting on July 15th, people who have entered the country without inspection, they've crossed illegally in order to seek asylum, probably because they didn't want to wait and live in a tent city on the other side of the border. So they've come to the United States to seek asylum by coming in without going first through a port of entry. Those people will no longer be eligible for bond under a new Attorney General decision issued in April. So come July, your family member, if they were caught crossing and they're here to seek asylum, they will be required by law to stay in that detention center throughout the entire pendency of their asylum case. And the reason this is so important, and the reason I really hope that we can help your family member, if that's their situation, get out now before July 15 hits, is because this can take years and years and years to litigate in an asylum case. So the idea that your family member has the opportunity to get out on bond now rather than wait for years and years and litigate their case from inside a prison is pretty crazy. So we need to get your family member out if they're here to seek asylum and they cross the border illegally. That said, there are other issues that may come up in showing that your family member is not eligible for bond. We can help you determine that through a basic intake consultation. So after we request bond, the immigration judge will set the bond hearing, the actual kind of like mini trial on whether to grant bond and for how much the bond will be within a couple of days, and at a minimum, or rather I should say at a maximum of a couple of weeks. So from the date we file or that you file your bond request, within a few days or maximum of a few weeks, you'll get your bond hearing. Now, it's important to submit a very persuasive packet for bond. You want to show the judge that your family member is not a risk of absconding, or what the immigration law is called a flight risk. Essentially, you want to show that your family member is going to show back up to court if the judge allows them to be released from the detention facility. You also want to show that your family member is not a danger to the community. Now, if your family member has prior convictions or DUIs, it's really important to consult with an immigration lawyer to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward in this bond request, because after that first request for bond and that first initial determination, the judge is not really required to reassess it constitutionally until at least 6 months later. We can always appeal and ask the Board of Immigration Appeals to redetermine and to assess whether the judge's ruling was fair or not. But in my experience, it's not the appeal of a bond is not particularly successful. So one should not hedge their bets on winning the appeal. One should try to put their best case forward with requesting the bond. Now, a lot of family members ask me, what's the amount that's going to be set? The bond amount. What am I going to have to pay to actually get them out? That's a great question, and there's really not a lot of guidance. It sometimes feels a little bit like whether the judge woke up on the right side of the bed or not. And I say that jokingly, but at the same time, they vary so greatly. I was recently speaking with a seasoned immigration lawyer, and she practices out of Miami, and she had a husband and wife in front of different immigration judges. She submitted the same materials for both the husband and wife. The husband, even though he had a serious criminal record, was released on bond, but his wife, who had no criminal record, was denied bond. So it really, there's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to the process on some level. There's no amount of lawyering that can make something that's discretionary be regulated and to be expected. So with that said, the minimum amount that the judge can set is $1,500. The maximum, there is no maximum. Here in Arizona, in some cases, we're seeing over $50,000 for bond being set. So that's again why it's so important to put forward your best foot when preparing your bond request, so that the judge has reasons to set a low enough bond that your family can afford and that's actually feasible. Finally, what happens after the bond has been set? Well, I mentioned before, if it's an amount that your family is never going to be able to pay, then it makes sense to either wait and request another bond redetermination later, or you could appeal right then and ask the Board of Immigration Appeals to review the record and say, I don't think that this is a reasonable bond based on the family's inability to pay, or the respondent, your family member, loved one or family member who is detained, their ability to pay. By contrast, if it is an amount that you have, that you are able to pay and that your family is prepared to move forward with, you need to, if it's over a certain amount, provide a cashier's check to any ERO office. And I'll again post another link in the comments so that you can see where to go and where the office nearest to you is located. And you post their bond, and then your family member is typically released later that day, or depending on the time of day, if ICE is unable to process their release, then the next morning. Now, if you're not able to go pick your family member up, perhaps you live in Florida or somewhere else and your family member is detained here in Arizona, you're not going to be able to potentially fly out and pick them up that same day. So what will often happen is your family member will be taken by ICE to the nearest bus station, and through Greyhound they hop on the bus, or ICE will take your family member or loved one to the airport here in Phoenix, and they can fly to you where you are. I hope that this has been helpful, and if you have any questions about getting your family member out of the detention center, my firm services the entire nation for bond hearings. Bond is something that I'm really passionate about, having myself been in a detention center when I was a teenager after being a runaway and getting placed in lockup. So it's something that's near and dear to me, and I'm very passionate about. It is ironic that I spend so many of my days inside these places when, as a 15-year-old, I couldn't wait to get out. But that said, these experiences are what has really lit a fire within me, and I want to help your family member have the freedom and ability to litigate their case the best that they can, and that's going to be from outside those prison walls. I'm Hillary Walsh, immigration lawyer based out of Phoenix, Arizona. We're making America even greater, one immigrant at a time, and if you need help getting your family member bonded out, call us.